Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Warsnick. I'm the Chief Financial Officer from Spectrum Human Services up in Western New York. And I'm going to be doing the Business Effectiveness Assessment Module Practice Improvement Network Excel training. A relatively small group with us today, so we'll be moving hopefully at a reasonable pace. I do have some housekeeping that I want to go over. First of all, I want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the CTAC website by Friday. You'll be able to find that recording in the Training and Resources section under BEAM. If after you've taken a look at the webinar today, if you think that would be helpful or useful for some of your staff, then they can go and take a look at that at their leisure. Right now, everybody's in listen-only mode, and if you are able to, we like to remind people to enter their attendee ID number when they log on to the conference call number. Now, during the course of the webinar, if you have any technical issues that is related to connections or your actual viewing of the WebEx, you would want to chat those questions to Jessica Russell. Your chat box would be in the lower right-hand corner. If you have any content questions, we may have some time later by the end of the webinar. I might be able to answer some simple questions. You would want to chat those questions to Justine. We're asking people to chat their question, and please don't raise your hand. Okay, so let's sort of dive into Excel. This is really the agenda for today. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through and really give you a basic idea of Excel. What is it and why should I care? A navigation, that is, we will talk a little bit about how you would move from one section of the spreadsheet to the other and where all the different functions live. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to do some simple formula building. I'm going to show you how we're able to do some very simple mathematical relationships and hope that you'll find that it's a pretty easy way to go. The fourth thing we're going to talk a little bit about is formatting. That is how you make your numbers look a bit more attractive. And the final piece at the end is we're going to talk a little bit about managing larger amounts of data. I think that for some folks, you're going to find that there's some really very simple, easy-to-use tools in Excel that will help you handle larger amounts of data. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to take a second, and we're going to jump right into Excel, where we'll be spending a majority of the time today. Okay, so I'm assuming that what everybody is seeing right now is a blank Excel spreadsheet. We are working in Excel 2010. Some of you may have Excel 2007 that will look very similar. And some of you may have Excel 2003 that's not going to look very much like this at all, at least as it relates to the menus and where things are. I always recommend people, if they can, to be working on the most current version of Excel. Excel 2010 has some very powerful upgrades to it, and I think is a bit more intuitive and easy to use. So let's see what we're talking about here. If this is the first time you're looking at an Excel spreadsheet, you'll notice a couple things. You'll first of all notice that what you basically have here is a matrix. Rows numbered down the left-hand side, columns in alphabetic order across the top, with each cell having a location. If you look up here and just below clip bar, you will see the location of the cell every time I move my cursor. I'm just moving my mouse and clicking on each of the cells. So each of the cells has a location. The number of columns goes out to XFD, and if somebody could tell me what that is, that's pretty far. And the number of rows you can go down is probably about 1 million rows, and they have functions that you can go even beyond that. So the amount of information that you can work in a single spreadsheet is quite robust. You'll also notice along the bottom here, follow my cursor down, you'll see that there are multiple sheets. I've already preloaded some data into sheet 2, but sheet 3 is empty, sheet 1 is empty, so you have the very similar environment, and you'll notice that it's the same numbering and lettering across the top. If you wanted to create another sheet, you just click on it, so you can have multiple areas for work. All right, let's go across the top and take a look at some of the functionality that we have in the menu structure. We'll start with the menus across the top. If we drop down and click on our file, for those who have worked in Excel or have been working in Word, you'll see a very similar kind of a file structure, obviously to save, to open, close. Here you have information about your files. You can look at the most recent files that you used, create a new one. One thing I did want to show people, and this is something that's often overlooked, is that there are a number of Office templates that are already existing. So if you have an application, sometimes you can find a very simple template that already does a bulk of the work for you. So take a look at your timesheets here. There's a whole variety of different kinds of templates that are available for you to simplify your work. Okay, so you have your basic print tab, your save, you send them as attachments, change the file type, a whole variety of things. So the home is where you do your housekeeping work, and then the file is where you do your housekeeping, and then let's go over it. Let's take a look inside of our first menu, which is where we're going to actually spend most of our time today, and where you're actually going to spend most of your time when you work inside of an Excel spreadsheet. First area here is very basic: cut, copy, format. These are functions that you're certainly, if you work in the other Microsoft products, you're familiar with. And we're going to be talking a little bit about copy in a little bit. The second piece here is your font section that's related to basically bolding, italicize, underlining. Again, those rich text formatting functions that is embedded in all the Microsoft products. We're going to move over to align. Again, another formatting piece, also allows you to merge some cells together. You can control your numbers through your number tab. Again, style sheets, we'll be talking a little bit as we move forward about how you may want to stylize your information. This is a basic an ability to insert rows, delete rows, and we have some editing functions over here. We'll be talking a little bit about fill and auto sum as we move along. Next section would be our insert. You'll see that this allows us to insert pivot tables and tables, which we're actually going to talk a little bit about near the end of the presentation. Illustrations, you can bring clip art in shapes, screenshots. This is another area that we won't be going in today, but this is certainly where some of the power is in Excel to do your charting. Multiple types of charts, relatively intuitive and easy to build. That's outside of the scope of what we're trying to do today, but important functionality within Excel. We have ways of changing lines, adding filters, doing hyperlinks within your spreadsheet, formatting your text, adding symbols. Again, some functionality that you would be familiar with in any of the other Microsoft products. Page layout allows you to add themes. You do your page setup. This is primarily related to creating print jobs, scaling your page, different options on grids. You'll see that if I want to take my grid lines off, I can just check them off here. If I wanted to take my header off, I could take it off here. I normally only work within the default environment, and allows you to arrange certain things. Formula, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about formulas, particularly as it relates to some of the simple mathematical functions inside the formula library, so we won't spend much time with that right now. Naming ranges, auditing your formulas. These are, now we're starting to move into some of the higher level functionality within Excel that we probably won't be, we certainly won't be talking about. There are certain, I've been using Excel for many, many years. I've never evacuated a formula. So these are our areas that the normal user would really not need to venture into. Same thing for the data. This allows us to get external data, make data connections. The data piece is a higher level functionality. The review, I move to review in most cases when I need to do my spell check, although you can move your spell check up into your top menu bar. Again, your research with thesaurus. This does allow you to protect your worksheets. Many times Excel worksheets are developed to be used by other people, and what we would do is go protect certain aspects of the sheet so people couldn't overwrite the formulas that we put in place. This allows us to make different views, different of the page layout. You can customize your views. You can do a full screen. Just different level of functionality. And a couple areas in here, freezing panes, although we won't be talking about that today. That's probably the most important function within this group. And then I have a couple of additional menus across the top for Developer, PowerPoint, and Acrobat. Those are add-ons that you most likely will not see when you open up your Excel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a simple example of a real-life problem, and I'm going to build out a portion of this spreadsheet, and I'm going to show you the different functions and the different ways of working within Excel while I'll build that out. So the first thing is that the model that we're going to build today is a simple mathematical model, and the problem is that I'm a clinician, or I'm a clinical supervisor or a clinic director, and all of the counselors within the clinic have a unit of service expectation for the year. And one of the problems that we have is finding a way to take a unit service expectation and be able to monitor that over the year. And in the monitoring, we want to know what my monthly expectation is going to be against my annual expectation. I need to know what I'm actually providing in units of service to give me an idea of where I am not only on a monthly basis, but on an annualized basis. So we're going to put this in a very simple format. So the first thing you notice is that I'm going to make a title for this model, and I'm just going to start typing. And I've got a I've got my cursor in the cell. As I start typing, you'll see that it'll start showing up in my cell. And you'll also see that it is being reflected in the formula bar just above it. So I'm going to call this a test model for managing productivity. Yeah. All right, so we have a basic title. The next thing that I normally do in developing a worksheet is to go in and put in those parameters that I know. So the first thing is that this is going to be a test model, and this is going to be a test model for David Wozniak. And I know that David Wozniak has a unit of service expectation of, let's say, 1,250 per year. So as you'll see, as I move from cell to cell, the information that I typed in, this is a text in this cell, and now this is represented as a number here. So the first thing that I want to do is I know that I want to monitor my unit of service expectation for the entire year. So I'm going to put the months across the top in each of my columns. So there's a couple ways of doing that. I could type January, then I could move over and I could type February, and then I could do that for each of the cells. But one of the things that I want to show you is there is a simpler way of doing that. So I'm going to write January in here. I'm going to go into the cell, and you'll notice at the lower right-hand corner of the cell, there's a little dark box. If I go in and put my cursor on there, you'll see that it changes to a small plus sign. I'm holding my left hand, click on my mouse over. You'll see I'm dragging it over, and lo and behold, what Excel is going to do, it's going to make a very good guess of what you're trying to accomplish, and it's going to put the month series in for you. Let me show you something else. You could do it, instead of doing it by a full month, you can just take, and let's do the same thing, and you'll see that it intuits again what you want to put in, and this time it intuits that you want to put an abbreviation for the month in. So since this fits into my cells a little bit better, let's go in, and I'm going to highlight this range, and I'm just going to press my delete key, and suddenly it goes away. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to be able to spread this 1,250 units, which is my unit of service expectation. I want to spread it across all 12 months. There are a couple of ways to do this, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this in a couple different ways by creating a formula. This is a simple mathematical formula. The value for each month is 1/12 of the 1,250. So here's the first lesson in making a formula. All formulas start with the equal sign, and you'll see that it moves up into your formula bar. And so what I could do is create a very simple mathematical relationship. All formulas have to have parentheses, an open and closed parentheses. So I'm going to open my parentheses. I'm going to type in the 1,250, and I'm going to then divide it by 12. I'm going to close my parentheses, and now I have the simple value of 1/12 of the 1,250. Now, what I do know is that this 104, 16, 6, 7, I'm equally distributing it across the months. So now let's do your basic copy and paste. There is a couple ways of doing the copy and paste. You can go copy. You'll see that it'll highlight it here. Then just go in, drag across, and then you can go up into your paste, and then you've copy and pasted it across. Another way of doing that would be to go here, right-hand click. You'll see when you right-hand click on a cell, you'll get some basic functional your cut, your copy, your paste options, a couple other menu items here. It really is personal preference. I'm a right-hand click guy, so I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that over. I'm going to right-hand click again. One of the things you'll notice that when you use this function, there are a number of different ways of pasting it over. For today, we're just going to do a basic paste, and that brought that over. All right, so we know how to do that. I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to show you another way to do a formula. The basic formula in Excel for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division is equal sum, open parentheses. I'm going to take 1250 again and divide it by 12. Now, I got the same result. In my first formula, I left the sum out. In my second formula, I added it in. You're going to get the same result. The sum is a function, and I'll show you how to do that with a formula. So let's take that out again. Let's pop over into formula. Let's go into our mathematic formulas. Now, if you're interested, you'll see there's a whole variety of financial and logical, date and time functions, lookup functions, math and trig functions. You're going to find that you're going to use very, very few of those. And in fact, you are probably going to use some of the basics. So when I pick sum here, what you'll notice is that it brings up a basic fill-in box. So what I could do here is I could then re-enter the 1250 divided by 12, say OK, and again, I'm going to get my same function. So I showed you three different ways of entering a formula. Some of the more complex formulas you will probably want to enter using the formula. Some of the simple addition, subtractions, multiplication, and division is just be able to build your formula with a very simple function, in this case, the sum function. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to take this and copy this over again. And there, it's there. Well, one of the concepts I want to talk about now is fairly simple, but it's one that takes a little bit thinking about. Now, if you take a look at this formula, I put in the 1250 into the formula and then copied it across. Well, if we're building this for David Warsnick and it's 1250, we may want to use the same kind of structure for somebody who has a different unit expectation. What if somebody had a 1100 expectation? The problem is then if every time this number changes, I'm going to have to go in and change the formula because the value that I'm working against is embedded in the formula. So I would have to jump up here, I'd have to change it over here, then I'd have to take this and copy it and paste it over. Now, it doesn't look like a lot of work, but if you're doing this for multiple people, if your clinic director changes this number all the time, then we want a little bit different way of spreading this number across. So let's go back to our 1250. I'm going to make a different formula. and then I'm going to, in this formula, let's use the, let's delete that out. Let's go up into our recently used. You'll see the last formula that I used, the last function, jumps up in here. And instead of typing the 1250 in there, I'm going to go and click on the cell. You'll see that I'm clicking on the cell B6, and it's going to enter that into the formula. I'm going to take that B6, and I'm going to divide B6 by 12. You'll see it'll show you the results here, and from what we were working before, remember that the 10416 is what we were looking for. So we're going to say OK. So then what we do is we have a formula of B6 divided by 12. So if I change this number, let's say we change that to 1300, the formula updates itself automatically. So then you don't have to go and recreate your formulas every time a number changes, and in this case, this number changes, and my formula updates. So let's go and copy and paste this across. Well, we just had a very unexpected result, because what I did is I copied before when I built the 1250 into the formula, and copied it across. It worked straight across. In this case, I'm returning zeros here in our month. So let's figure out what's going on. So when I built this formula, I said go to B6 and divide it by 12. When I copy the formula to the right, you'll see the formula changes to say go to C6 and divide it by 12. So every time I move the formula over one column, it's going to reference a cell that's over one column. So then we have the exact same situation here where this referenced C, now this one references D. There is a very simple fix for this problem. The only reason that I'm going through this is that this is really one of the fundamental pieces of formula building that you really need to understand in Excel to make your workflow really very easily. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to very simply go up into the formula. I move my cursor up. I left-hand click. It enters it right into the formula. You'll see my formula is now represented by boxes here. B6 is what I'm looking for. This is where the formula is. I'm dividing it by 12. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a $ in the formula. A $ in front of the B says to Excel, don't change the column reference when you add the cell over. So let's see what happens this time. Now it works. If you'll see, last time I copied it without the $, it went from referencing B to C. When I add the $, it keeps the column header to the right, the column identifier to the right. And this is a concept that, again, is very important, because if I want to have this number be able to change my entire formula, I really need to basically freeze this cell location in my formula, because look what happens now. I can send that to 1300 and everything updates automatically. I can go to 1250 back, and I can go to 1100. And again, I'm seeing an updating on my values. So that's an important piece, and that's just an absolute cell reference. Show it to you again. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my recently used. I'm going to go to sum. I'm going to go here and pick this and divide it by 12, my simple mathematical relationship. then I'd say I want B to stay the same, put a $sign in, and copy it across. Very simple, very straightforward. All right, so what I showed you so far is I'm able to let Excel do all the work and used the fill function to go through and create my headers. I built a simple sum formula. We've showed 3 different ways of doing the sum formula. And now what I want to do is set up a situation where I can input my actual unit production and then calculate what my actual is as a percentage of what I need to generate on a monthly basis. So the first thing that then this number represents my benchmark standard on a monthly basis. So I'm going to label that so I know what's going on. So I'm going to do David Worsnick, and I'm going to do benchmark. And again, all I did was go up into the formula bar, put my cursor in, and added text to it. Now, here's the problem, though. David Worsnick benchmark, but I can't see the entire label because it's now behind my January formula. There's a simple solution for that. Go up into the margin between B and C. As you notice my cursor, again, it goes from a large plus to a narrower plus with arrows pointing either way. Once I get to this point, I'm going to left-hand click and hold it and just drag it across. And you'll see is I made this cell wider. If you click in here, it'll tell you how wide it is. And I can now see the entire label. But through my production here, I left this column here, and I really don't want to be there. I want to be able to save as much space on this as possible. So I'm going to go up into the margin top. You'll see it highlights the entire column. I'm going to right-hand click, and I am just going to delete that. Very simple, very straightforward. Okay, so now I have David Worsnick. This is my benchmark standard. That's on a monthly basis. So then what I need to do is I need a place where I can put my actual units of service. So I'm going to put actual. Again, just typing text in, very simple. And let's just use a couple of values right now just to put them in, because these are going to be input fields. So do 12. All right, so that row is very simple, and we're just going to put our actual units in as we move along or month to month. So what I want then here is I want to be able to demonstrate that what percentage of the 104 the 108 is. Okay, so I need a label again. I'm going to do percentage of benchmark. All right, so now I need to build a formula. Now, the mathematical formula is very simple. We can do, I'll show you the 3 ways. Do equal, open parentheses. In this case, we can point to the cell. We can divide, put the division in, and then go and point to the second cell. And it will generate the relationship, mathematical relationship to that. Now again, when we referenced the cell as part of our formula before, we had to go and fix this cell. You don't have to do that here because the relationship between the 2 cells will always be the same. So in this relationship, basically we're saying divide C10 by C9. We want to divide D10 by D9, so we're certainly in a position now we can just copy and paste that across. And now you'll see, because there are no values here, that's going to return a value of 0. And once we put something in there, it's going to create our mathematical formula for us. So we did that sum. So that's one way of doing it. The other way, another very simple way, is again to add the function. Now you'll notice here as I start adding the functions, it's going to list all of the sum functions. I could go to, and it will tell you what each of them do. So this is a good way of referencing all the different functions that start with sum. In this case, I really just want this single one. I do a sum, do my open parentheses. Again, point to my cell, divide it by the other cell, close my parentheses, and there you've got it. The other way, and let's go up and show you on the formula bar again, or the function bar. Let's go into our formulas. Again, we're going to jump back to recently used. I'm going to grab my sum. And you'll see now it intuits what I want. It is putting, it auto-populated the C10 in here already. So that's it. So I'm going to do my divided. I'm going to go down into here. Oops. And I'm going to get invalid because I don't use this function very often. And it put a comma in there. And when I went through and took that comma out, so I made an error. It kept the formula up there, and it gave me an opportunity to go up and fix it. So let's copy this guy across, and basically what we have is we have our beginning of our model. So we know that this is my benchmark standard. This is what my standard is for the year. You'll note that when I change my yearly standard, then this remains constant. My benchmark changes, so my percentage of benchmark changes also. Well, one of the things that we now want to do is we want to sort of close the loop on this model and show us for some of our totals. Now, again, there's a couple of ways of building this formula. So let's try again to see if we can get our recently used. Let's put our sum in there. Now you'll notice, again, Excel is intuitive. It makes a guess of what you want to do here. And what it thinks you want to do is to add B9 through N9. Well, B9, it picked B9 because there is a value in the cell, and it doesn't know that it's not a number, but that's okay. So let's go in and say, okay. So you have a situation where when I used the formula function library, Excel is going to make a reasonably good guess on what I'm trying to sum. The other way to do that would be to just do our sum, open our parentheses, click, drag, close it up, and put it in. You'll note that the 108 across each of the months adds up to our benchmark total, 1,300. What we want to do then is we want to add this down, or copy and paste this down. So as of this point in time, I have 108 and 112, so I have 220 here. So one of the things I want to know is I want to know what percentage 220 is of the 1,300. This formula that takes the value in cell 10 and divides it into the value in cell 9 is exactly the formula that we want. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that. So what we do know is that the 220 units that we produced for January and February are 16.9% of the total that's necessary. The problem with this is that I would have to know what percentage January and February is of a total year. Well, one of the things I could do then very easily is I could build a formula that says 2 months divided by 12 months is 16.6. That would tell me that my unit of service that I've generated through January and February is 16.9% of what I need, and I'm at 16.6% of the year, so I'm ahead of the game here. Well, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go in and build this formula every single time, because then in March you'd have to go into the formula and put a 3, and then in April you'd have to go and put a 4, and you really don't want to have to not only not be bothered with that, but you don't want to remember that you're going to have to do that every single month, because if you forget, then you're going to be returning an incorrect value. So the simplest way to do that is to use a function called count, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You'll see that these functions were sum. I'm going to do count, and all count does is count the number of pieces of data in the cell. So you'll see the count is 2. So if I add 113 here, that changes the count to 3. But that's incomplete, so all I have to do is go up again into my formula, and let's divide that by 12. So now what I have is I have 3 months worth of data in. I had 99% here, 103% here, 103% here. So I'm at 25.5% of my expectation through 25% of the year. So one thing that we do need to do is label what this is, percentage of year. Let's move this over real quick. Now, one of the ways that I'm going to show you this is that I put this in over here, but I really want it over here in this cell. So I can either copy and paste it and then delete it. I could retype it, or I could just go highlight the cell, move on to the dark line. You'll see again my plus changes, and just drag it over, and that would be fine. So I'm going to do the same thing with this guy, because I don't like that sitting out over there. And you'll see when I moved it, all the formulas updated themselves automatically. It knows, Excel knows that you're referencing this field, and when you move it, it updates everything automatically. Okay, so we're moving right along here. What we do is we have a simple set of mathematical relationships, simple formulas, simple text, and one of the things that I want to show you is that we're going to use some of the features to make this look a little prettier. And one of the first things we're going to do is nobody wants to see numbers carried out to 4 decimal places. So I'm going to do a couple things. First thing I'm going to do is going to right-hand click here, and you'll see that I have an ability here to format my cells. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to a number, and I'm going to take out the decimal places, and you'll see now that turns into a 108. It's going to do rounding when you do that, but that's okay. Now, there's a couple ways that I can change all of these. I can use the Format Painter and move that over. The other way I can do is highlight the entire range, right-hand click, go to my format cells, go to my number, put my decimal, use it. This way I'm going to add a separator because I have a 1300 over here, and I want that to look a little bit prettier. So that's the case down here. These numbers, in fact, are percentages. So I want these to be presented as a percentage. So I'm going to highlight my range again, right-hand click, go to Format Cells, and then in this case, I'm going to use percentage. Now again, it shows you what your number is going to look like. It's going to be 99.69. Maybe I don't want this carried out to 2 decimal places. As you see, as I change my decimal, the decimal places that'll then change and show me what my number is going to look like. And you'll see that I've represented all my numbers as percentages. I'm going to clean this up even a little bit more. One of the things is that now we have these 3 numbers, I really need to separate them out a little bit because when your eye is drawn to this, it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what you're looking at. So one of the things that we're going to do, I'm going to highlight this range, and I'm going to go into the border button here, and that'll give you all the options of how you can set your borders. I'm going to do the top and double border, which is a standard kind of border that you would put in place. Now, so that's a little bit better, but there's a difference between these numbers that are generated by mathematical formula and these numbers that are a part of your input. This number is an input also. One of the things that I always do is to show people where the input number is. I'm going to highlight this range, then I'm going to go into my fill color, and I'm going to pick yellow. Yellow is now the fill that I'm going to use. This demonstrates or tells everybody that these numbers are input numbers. This is an input number also. Well, let's take this guy and let's set him aside, and let's do a different fill. If you do the drop down on your fill, and you can see different, it'll apply them for you, and then you can select the fill that best suits what you want. So suddenly we have then a little bit different presentation from the basic numbers, and it allows us to do a bit more appealing looking presentation of the numbers. As we were going through the menus above, I don't know if you noticed, but there are a large amount of the functionality within Excel is to help you format your numbers. One of the things that you want is that you want people to be able to take a look at your spreadsheets and take a look at your analysis and have their eyes drawn correctly so they can actually see the numbers and have it a better user experience. So one of the things I'm going to take down here is I'm going to make that bold, and then I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to go into my alignment and I'm going to put them in the center, and I want a comma in this, so I'm going to jump over to Format Cell, Number. I don't want any decimal. I'm going to put that in, and then voila. So this is the benchmark model for David Wozniak. I'm going to go up. You can even format within a cell. I'm going to go up and highlight, change that to red. So I have David Wozniak. I have my test model. I'm going to upgrade that. I'm going to make that a little bit larger. I know I'm going quickly now, but these are some very simple formatting pieces that you should be familiar with. And so I did this model for David Wozniak. What if I had another staff I wanted to do this model for? Now you'll see that I'm highlighting the entire area. I'm going to do a right-hand click. I'm going to copy. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to paste it. And this is a model now that I want to generate for Julie Kotowski. I didn't tell her I was going to use her name, but I don't think she'll mind. But Julie, because she's a supervisor, she has a different unit expectation, and that unit expectation is 600. So by using a format of my formula referencing the cell, I can just reproduce these as many times as I want to. Now, I'm going to take a second to show you something, and relatively quickly, because I think it's, oops, I meant to delete that. I think it's important for people to understand some additional functionality in Excel that many people miss. You'll see, and I'm going to show this relatively quickly, just to give you an idea of what some of the function available in Excel is. So this 102, this 112, this 112, these numbers had to come from somewhere. And most likely they came from a list of information. And this mostly comes out of billing systems. So in this case, what I have is I have a therapist and their name. I have the service and all the services that I provided, all the CPT codes for those services, and all the dates that I provided those units of service. What we did is the data that creates these different values is sitting in this data set. And I'm going to show you really quickly, because then we need to start wrapping up, how easy it is in Excel to get the data from here to that little piece that we just created. One of the things I want to notice here is there's 1,628 rows in this data, so there's a fair amount of data in there. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of magic. I'm going to go up into Insert. I'm going to insert a table. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to insert a pivot table. And I'm going to tell the pivot table that I want it right there. I'm going to say OK. Then I'm going to say I want my therapist on my rows. I want my services and my columns. I want to count how many services that I have, and I want to know on what dates they provided the services. Now let's close this up. So I'm going to go into here. I want this grouped. I want this grouped on months. And then I'm going to go in Filter. And I'm going to take off all my cancellations and all my no-shows, because all I want is my services. So in the time that it took me, and I was timing it, took me less than 2 minutes, I'm able to take 1,600 rows of information off of my billing system. I'm able to put together a quick and dirty pivot table that sums the units by type by month. So in July, David Warsnick did 109, and can very easily go back here, and for my July, I have my 109 figure. Lo and behold, my expectation is 108, and I'm slightly above. One last thing before we close up is that I can go back to that little piece of magic that I did here. I can then go in and say, instead of doing a pivot table, let's do a pivot chart. Let's put that guy right there. Say OK. Let's bring down my therapist and my date and my CPTs, and in less than 15 seconds, not only do I have a pivot table on those 1,600 data elements, I have a graph of the two individuals that I can then just filter here or filter here. Now, I know that I moved very, very quickly through this, but I felt that it was very important for me to show you this piece because the pivot tables and the pivot charts are one of the most robust and important sets of functionality within the Excel that many people never get to. So that's one thing that I wanted to show you. Okay, we're going to jump over real quickly to the, see if I can get back to my PowerPoint. And we're going to do some real quick housekeeping, and then we're going to get going. All right, so how do you learn to do Excel? This obviously wasn't a true training exercise. It was really a way of giving you a general orientation. You can do formal self-guided online training. There's all kinds of training programs out there. They cost money. You get to do them at their own pace. There's some very good ones out there. There's also hands-on training. You'll see training brochures coming around that allows you to go to a site. You may need to sit for 2 or 3 days to learn. Here's some informal self-guided training. These are free trainings that you would work through at your own pace. How-to books and manuals. You can begin to count the number of manuals that are out there. Microsoft's Excel website has some informal self-guided training also, and you'd be surprised at the number of YouTube videos that are out there that you can watch a user performing a simple function. So that's a couple ways that you can learn a little bit more. This is a paid political announcement. We have some upcoming business practice trainings. This is the MTM series, and this information is also available on the website. Here's the contact information. I did want to remind people that the first Beam mandatory training is this Friday at noon. It's the orientation to the benchmarking model. We'll certainly be interested in looking forward to everybody attending that. And I used up all of my allotted time. One thing that I'm going to ask is that when you log off, you'll be presented with a survey. One of the things that's important for us at CTAC is to understand that and make sure that the training that we're doing and the information we are providing is useful for you and presented in a positive and useful manner. And if you would participate in that, I'd appreciate that very much. That's all the time we have for today. I hope I gave you a little bit of a feel for Excel, its simplicity, its intuitiveness, and the value that it can bring to your work. If you're sitting there on your desk and you have a piece of paper with a bunch of numbers and you've got a little calculator there and you're using and adding up those numbers on that piece of paper, I would very strongly recommend that you take a look at Excel. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from me in the future. Thank you again.